Okay. So tonight we have with us Veronica Green. She has presented for us before and she is amazing. All of her slides are engaging, and you're going to really be able to find some new loose parts play ideas for your classroom. So, Veronica is an early childhood consultant specializing in loose parts play, sensory processing, and Reggio inspired practice. As a post-secondary instructor in the early childhood education program at Mid College, she is passionate about guiding educators and helping them with that creative connection. Her perspective is deeply shaped by her journey as a parent to an autistic son, which has transformed how she approaches both education and parenting. Through her work, she inspires and supports educators in embracing child led environments, fostering rich environments, and seeing children as capable and competent learners. And Veronica, we are just so happy that you are here with us tonight. Welcome, and the floor is yours.
Awesome. That is such a lovely intro. Thank you so much. I am very excited to be here. I love connecting with my fellow educators and learning together. And loose parts play is one of my favorite things to talk about. And it is such a wonderful topic because it can it can transform your practice. It can enhance your planning. It can change how you see children, how they learn, how they make sense of their own world. It can keep you curious and creative. A lot of adults find that we are not creative anymore. And some of that is due to our current education systems and how much we are not allowed to get up and move when we want to, or engage in the kinds of ideas that we have. And early childhood education is something that when we get to be with children every day, it is a privilege to work with children and to learn alongside them. And watching them engage with the different kinds of variables and the different kinds of things that are um, given to them and the opportunities, it can really spark your own creativity. And to get to see those wondrous moments again is something that keeps us young and inspired as well. And when I first learned about loose parts play, it really helped me find my own creativity again. So basically everything that Dr. Oh, sorry, I'm in a new setup and my husband's table like spins. It's very weird. Okay. So I made the table spin on myself there. She already introduced everything that's already on this slide, but I really found when I started embracing loose parts play into my practice, or I was already doing it, and I think a lot of you will already realize that this is really part of play already, but we're going to understand the theory behind it because that's really important. And when I learned the theory piece of it, it made so much more sense. It helped me to move past a lot of my fears and misconceptions and really embrace what it actually is and see in a very different lens as to what the children are actually doing with these materials. Okay, so tonight we're going to go through some of like what the theory is. And I know theory can be boring, but I tend to have a little bit of a special sauce of picking out key pieces of theory and really helping bridge that gap to practice. And so that you can see how you put that theory into practice and what that looks like. Okay, so as she already said, all of my slides have lots of inspiring photos on them. And before we get going, I want you to know that every photo, every video that you're going to see, take it as inspiration. It is never meant for you to copy. Okay, it's meant for to give you an idea, to spark your own creativity, for you to take that back into your own practice and go, why did that spark my creativity? What made me drawn to that? What is it about that I might want to apply, or what am I already doing that I could bring this in? So it's never about me saying this is what loose parts play only is. It is about here's how I've interpreted it, here's how I see here's the help to help you put it into your practice, but it's never about copying because your context is very different from my context. The children that you're going to work with are different from the children that I worked with. So it's always going to look a little bit different. Okay. And because I believe that children are capable and competent, and I value beauty for children, I believe that children have the right to have beautiful things, just like I believe that so do educators. That's why I put a lot of thought and intention into my slides to make professional development engaging and inspiring. So that's a value of mine. So I put that into how I set things up, but it is not my focus. I also see beauty in mess. I don't think there is mess in children's play. I see the beauty in it, okay? So to get back to my train of thought here, it's more about take it as inspiration and listen to the why behind things, take ideas from it, but please don't ever think I'm telling you to this is exactly what you should be doing. And this is what loose parts play only looks like, okay? I really try to find a lot of different ideas to say how that expresses it and what that might look like in different contexts, okay? So the first thing we're gonna go to is into the theory of loose parts play. As I said before, this helps take away a lot of misconceptions and fears because I've had them too. Okay, when I first started with loose parts play, the two most common places that we usually learn about it are social media and Pinterest. Okay, that's where I learned about it as well. I did not know that there's actually a paper written by Simon Nicholson called The Theory of Loose Parts Play until about a year or so into me actually exploring with loose parts materials and stuff. And when I learned what the theory was, it really helped take away a lot of those fears and allowed me to embrace it more. Okay, so I don't have the chat open, otherwise I'd be asking. Maybe I'll try to do that and see if I can still see my slides because that makes it more engaging. Okay, how many of you are actually aware that there is a paper called The Theory of Loose Parts Play? You can put it in the chat as I keep talking. Yes or no is fine. I'm always curious. There's an actual paper written by it. So Simon Nicholson he was an architect in the 70s, and he wrote a paper called Theory of Loose Parts Play, How to Not Cheat Children. Okay. So he basically felt that children's creativity was being taken away by the different environments that they were being put in. Like he thought that a lot of children's environments were very static, like children's museums, childcare centers, playgrounds, schools, that all of the fun and the creativity was done by the construction workers, the architects, the interior designers. They are the ones who actually got to play around with the components and various of the world to experiment and discover things from them. They're the ones that actually got to have the hands-on experience. And by the time all that was done, the environments were left very static. So no movable pieces. Children, like it has to stay in one spot or it's adhered to the wall. Like there was nothing movable about it. And that was really starting to impact children's creativity. So he wrote this paper to talk about that and how children naturally like to play with the components and variables of the world, right? If you're out for a walk with children on a community walk, how many of them are like, I want to collect every little rock that they find or leaves? They all come back with stuff in their pockets because they naturally want to pick these things up. They're curious about them and they want to explore with them, right? They might want to crunch them. They might want to taste them. They might want to bang the sticks or throw the rocks, whatever it is. And so in his paper, he talks about how loose parts play is the playing around with the components and variables of the world in order to make experiments and discover new things and form new concepts. So that's what he's trying to get us to do is to look at our environments and go, how can we make it more dynamic, more engaging? What variables do we have that could allow children to explore and invent? And we know that children are innately curious, right? They learn through play, they make sense of their world through play. So when we as educators use our environment and we gather a variety of different variables, and I'm being very intentional around the word that I'm using. I'm trying to not use the word material and I'm using the word variable because I believe that language helps get us into the right mindset. And as we go through this, that'll make more sense in a little bit. But so this is basically how he defines loose parts play. Right. There we go. So he also goes on to say that in any environment, both the degree of inventiveness and creativity and the possibility of discovery are directly proportional to the number and kind of variables in it. So this is where having that dynamic space, the different kinds, and the amount of variables that we have is directly influencing children's ability to discover and explore and get that inventiveness and that creativity, okay? So this is where I always say when we have to be very intentional about the kinds of variables that we bring into our environment, that's connected to theory. Okay, so when we are very intentional around that, we can really help bring those wondrous moments out for children. And when we bring out wondrous moments and use the different variables and materials for that, it can be the catalyst to children exploring new things for the first time. And if you've ever experienced a child learning something for the very first time, that moment of and being a part of that is a privilege, and it's a wonderful experience, and we can learn from that as well. Okay. So he also goes on to say, for environments to meet the loose parts requirement, they have to be dynamic. So I haven't even gotten to lists of variables that we could talk about, right? Because we are going to see that soon. I'm trying to focus on how dynamic loose parts play is. Like I said, I'm very intentional about the language that I use. I don't just say loose parts, and I don't just say materials, because that's not what it's a theory. It's not just about the physical, tangible items. Loose parts play is about the experimenting, about the transporting, about the putting together, taking apart, about the feeling, the touching, the moving. That is what loose parts play is, and using the natural variables in their environment to explore and invent all of those things. That's what loose parts play is. The items that we might put into our environment are the catalyst to those movements and that dynamic piece. But for you to embrace loose parts play, it is a requirement for it to be dynamic. So this means, as educators, we have to embrace toddlers, preschoolers, whatever age it is, collecting rocks, collecting blocks, whatever it is, filling up an entire box of items, pushing it across from one area to the next, dumping it out, sorting through it, ripping paper, adding water to things. All of that is part of loose parts play. It's dynamic. Loose parts play does not happen in one area of your room. A lot of times people think that loose parts play is like, oh, I'm going to put a loose parts shelf together. That is not really what loose parts play is. It's about the exploration, right? So the reason we're talking about this is because, again, these misconceptions or fears that you might have can really hold you back from moving forward with loose parts play. And that's why I like to talk about the theory, because when we can get past that, and you're still going to have emotions around children moving all of these things, but when we can remember that it's a requirement for that dynamic piece, it can help us move forward with it. Because when we have our own fears, those fears stop children from engaging in their own curiosities. And when our fears stop them, what are we saying to them, right? So this is how we use theory to inform our practice, to challenge ourselves so that children can grow further too, okay? So it's a requirement to have dynamic aspects with loose parts play. Okay. There are some other key words that he uses in the paper as well that I just want to point out. These are some examples here: invent, discover, modify, construct, evaluate, fun, form, play, experiment. These are all very dynamic words, right? So that immovable piece, the transforming, the high, that's going to bring high engagement in play as well. So as I said, when we have to be mindful of our own fears and how that might be holding back children's play as well too, okay? Because this is what loose parts play is. The materials, the physical, tangible things, and the other variables, it's the catalyst to all of these words, to these actionable words. Okay, so in the paper, Simon Nicholson, he does list out some things of like what these variables are. And the very first one he mentions is materials and shapes. Now, I interpret it as, when I see that, the materials obviously are physical, tangible items. And I think that's what gets talked a lot about on social media, on Pinterest as well. And there's often talk about a lot of these different categories that you'll see here on the screen of different kinds of variables that you might want to collect, such as like wood items, metal items, natural fabrics, glass and ceramics. Yes, you can use glass with young children, and ceramics. You can use fragile items. It's the teaching part is how do we do that? What safety aspects, doing that risk and hazard assessment, and talking about, well, what happens if it does break? How do we carry this item? How do we place it down? And things like that. So when I first started using glass items, I started with one item. I didn't bring in 10 pieces of glass. I brought in one, and we talked about it. We talked about the fragility. We talked about how we place it. We don't run with it, things like that. And then did that item break on the first day? Yes, because I knew that was going to happen. But we talked about, I made sure that I had the materials that I need to make sure I could clean it up properly, and how did I introduce that and all that stuff, okay? But there's also plastics and recycling as well, okay? So these are just some examples of some of the different physical, like the materials I believe that he's talking about in his paper as well, okay? Now, he also goes on to talk about so many other things. That was just the first thing that he listed. He also talks about smells, electricity, magnetism, gravity, gases and fluids, sounds, music, motion, chemical interactions, such as like vinegar and baking soda, right? That's a chemical interaction, okay? Cooking, fire, people, animals, plants, words, concepts, and ideas are all considered loose parts variables to have loose parts play. Okay, this is what he talks about in the paper. So when we go to the theory and we look at it, it can really open up our perspective and go, wow, so there's so much more that is included into loose parts play for what I might bring into my environment, that we don't have to ask ourselves, is this a loose part? It's more about how are the children going to explore with it? Is it going to create some of those inventiveness? Is it going to create opportunities for transformation, modifying, evaluating, forming new things? That's what we can be asking ourselves instead of, is this a loose part? Is it considered a loose part? It's not about yes or no or good or bad or right or wrong. That's not what this is. It's more about how can it bring out those dynamic, actionable words that you just saw on the screen. Okay. And so when we look at these variables, it really opens up the idea of what loose parts play is. Okay. So he also goes on to say, with all these things, children love to play, experiment, discover, my chat box is hiding it, invent, and have fun. Okay. So there is so much that can happen. And I think it's really important that he mentions and have fun. Play is about having fun, right? Play is self-directed, it's intrinsic, it's the person's choice. Play is not just for children, it's for everybody. So there's like those four characteristics that play is. I forget who writes it. Shoemaker. Oh, I can't remember his last name. Stewart, something Stewart. I can't remember his last name. I can see his face. About what he talks about, what play is. There's four different characteristics. And so having fun is that part of that intrinsic aspect of it. So it's really important. And I can see that I have a spelling mistake here on my slide. I will try to fix that later. Okay. Okay. So we've talked a little bit about what the loose parts play theory is, right? So at the beginning of this session, you may have had some of these myths or misconceptions that it's only for preschool age or older, when in actuality, loose parts play is for any age. There is no age limit or age category for this. It's for everybody. So infancy all the way to whatever age. Seniors, right? They can all engage in loose parts play. It's not only small pieces. Variables come in all different sizes, shapes, and forms. So we can use the concept of loose parts play with under threes. Obviously, we have to consider mouthing, cleaning, and safety aspects, right? To make sure that we are meeting those regulations. However, though, we need to remember that it's not just about small pieces, because that might be what we're seeing on Pinterest and social media. There are so many different things that we can use, okay? It's not just the physical tangible items, right? We just spent a good amount of time on that. The materials, variables are materials, cooking, nature, animals, sound, movement, water, so much more than that, right? So we've opened up our perspective to that. And as I mentioned before, there's sometimes a misconception that you have to have a separate loose parts play area. Loose parts play is the dynamic actions that the children are making with the variables in their environment. So really, loose parts play is happening in all of your learning centers, especially when we are open to children moving those items, transforming them, right? Like that dynamic piece as well. Now, are you going to have fears and emotions as you embrace loose parts play? Yes. Do I still have them? Yes. But I try to I acknowledge the emotion or the fear that I'm having, and then I go, okay, what is it they're trying to do? How can I say yes? Do I need to consider safety? Can I suggest a different variable for them to use if that particular one doesn't quite work? If there's like a major hazard that they don't know, or there's a safety guideline, right? How can I still say yes? But what adaptations do I need to make? Or can I just say yes? Is it really my fear that is causing them? So just this story is coming to mind right now, so I'm just going to share it quick. Because it really opened up my mind as to what a physical tangible item could become. So it was summertime. I just bought a giant box of chalk, right? Like a 24-piece box of chalk. And the children asked me, they said, Ronnie, can you, because they called me Ronnie, they said, Ronnie, can we put the chalk in with the water? And my first reaction was, oh, I just bought this box. They're going to waste the materials. That was the word I thought of. They're going to waste them. Because I'm thinking this chalk is to be used for art, on the outside stone or whatever it is, or on the board, whatever. And I'm like, I don't want them to be wasteful with it. And I said, you can have 3 pieces, because we had like an outdoor kitchen area. And I was like, you can use 3 pieces and you can use that. I observed them. I had my own fears, right? And I had that different kind of, I guess you could say, like a fixed mindset. And I said, you can have 3 pieces. I watched them explore those 3 pieces of chalk and how they used water to transform it. They started to squish it down, and it got into like this new, thick, chalky paste. They were using words I'd never heard them use before, like minuscule, because they were adding different amounts of water, so their language is being enhanced. And I was watching this and I was amazed, and I went, you can use as much chalk as you want, because they were little scientists. I had a fixed mindset into what this particular material was, what chalk could only be. And while watching them, I went, wow, look at what this could be if I can say yes more and got past my own fear of it. And that's not wasteful. And I now see chalk very differently. We don't even use chalk for drawing anymore half the time. It's more about smashing it with mallets and meat tenderizers and adding water and making paste and having a mortar and pestle and seeing what different like textures we can make and all that kind of stuff. So the children really taught me and pushed me to challenge my own mindset around that. And when that happened, they played for an hour, if not longer. Right? So it leads to deeper engaged play. So that's my example. When our own fears hold us back, we limit their play and their abilities to engage in their ideas. When I started to see how chalk was not just a physical item that could only be used in one way, I saw how dynamic it could be. I saw how it could be transformed and modified. And that allowed, when I said yes to that, that opened up my perspective, and now I see chalk very differently. And that goes into other things. Now I start seeing how other variables can be used in different ways. Okay. Okay, so I have a little video to play here. I always have way too many slides to get through because I go off on tangents. Okay, I'm really looking at the time. Okay, I'm going to turn off my video because it plays better when I do that. I have the chat open if we have any issues. If everybody can just make sure they're muted so that we don't have any sound issues, that's always helpful. And we'll watch this video.
Loose parts are the building blocks of adventure play. It's human nature to want to loosen up natural elements from forest and field and to remake the landscape, creating enclosure, shelter, and tools. Loose parts offer the abundance of nature in urban spaces where children may not find what they need for their natural creativity. Loose parts are not toys. They can be used in all sorts of ways. Children immediately start investigating their qualities and inventing uses for them. It's called compound flexibility. This kind of play, in sufficient quantity, really does build neural complexity and physical literacy, a resilient body and a flexible mind. When we offer children loose parts, they almost instantly convert a boring flat green space into an exciting adventure playground for themselves. The creativity is literally endless. The secret is the open-ended quality of loose parts. Here at Earth Day Canada, we're lucky to have a shed to store our loose parts for our play events. What's in here is mostly reused, upcycled materials that somebody donated, or we even found them on the street. So you can see we have sonotubes, we have hula hoops, we have a pair of crutches, we have costumes, and over on this wall we have a lot of odds and ends, pots and pans, and baskets and chalk and different things like that. This is a swimming pool vacuum cleaner hose. If it gets one hole in it, it's damaged and it's no good anymore, but it's fantastic for play. You cut it up into smaller pieces and the children use it for water play. It's great. Kids always like to build things with wheels, an essential part of your loose parts collection. And here at Earth Day, we all have our favorite loose part.
So my favorite loose part is the simple box. People often joke they buy their kids elaborate, expensive toys and the kids end up playing with the box. And there's a reason for that. Kids can use it to get in, pop out. They can use it to hide in, as a house or fort, cut windows or doors, peeping holes. And finally, they can completely cut it down and use it as a sliding surface on grassy or snowy hills. Simple box, so many possibilities.
I love bringing real electronics to our outdoor play events. These are things kids see all the time but rarely get to actually play with. They love pressing the buttons, dialing knobs, and talking on the phone to their friends. They also love to include them into a larger play scheme where they're part of their fort or part of a robot that they've built with cardboard boxes and other things. Another thing that's really fun to do is to take them apart. It's really fascinating for the kids to see what's inside.
Spools make wonderful loose parts for play because they are so versatile and they come in a number of different sizes and materials, which is great for different ages. These are very lightweight aluminum ones. The cardboard and plastic ones are also light. These big spools make excellent tables and chairs, but if you're feeling a little more adventurous, all you have to do is flip it over, take a seat, and roll away.
My favorite loose parts are pots, pans, and the bucket. Children use the pots and pans to roleplay as chefs and use the bucket to create a beat for their inner soul.
My favorite loose part is rope. A tire swing, a game of tug of war, a zip line, they all begin with rope. And rope's one of our best loose parts in terms of combining things. So when kids are engineering and being really creative, they're using rope.
Kids love suitcases and anything basically that has wheels. It's a great way for them to take things from one place to another, and it's also a great place to store your loose parts, like dress-ups. Kids of all ages love playing with dress-ups. They can be a business worker, a superhero, or a cowboy. With a suitcase full of stuff, you can be anything you want.
My favorite loose part is the humble stick. And I love sticks because you can find them almost everywhere and anywhere, and they're free. And they can be so many different things. They can be paintbrushes and pencils. They can be fishing rods. They can be horses. And they can be magic wands.
So this is my favorite loose part. It's an egg beater or a whisk. And kids are really interested in the mechanics of it. They study how it works and then they play with it. They're really hard to find. So if you ever do see one, grab it. So it takes a little bit of work and planning to collect loose parts, but it is so worth it because it makes for endlessly enriching, creative, fun play for children.
Okay, so as you can see, there's so many different kinds of loose parts variables that you can bring into your environment and use, and how loose parts play, as I said before, is really like the catalyst or the connection to so many other of those different types of play that children engage in. Imagination, the symbolic play, the fantasy, the physical play, exploratory, right? Isn't it like Bob Hughes who says there's like 16 different types of play? And so the loose parts play, when we have that intention behind the different kinds of materials and variables that we bring in, can really help bring create so many opportunities for children to engage in that, right? And that dynamic piece is really important. Okay, so there's another thing that I love talking about, because I love talking about self-regulation and sensory processing. And this is a different way to look at it. Oftentimes, self-regulation is only talked about in the context of behaviors, right? And so I do many workshops on that kind of stuff, but I also like to make connections to different pieces of our practices together. And I believe there's a lot of connections with loose parts play and self-regulation in our everyday practice as well. So there we go. Okay, so sensory elements. So we all know that children use their entire bodies to process information, right? They play holistically. They don't just show up and go, I'm going to develop my language skills, or I'm just going to play with the water today. That's all I'm experiencing is only the wetness. There's so much happening when they do that. Like they're using finger dexterity, they might be using imaginative play. Like there's so many different things that are happening. So children engage in play using their whole bodies. And when we consider sensory aspects and self-regulation, not just with a behavior view, when we look at how we can use it naturally with play, that can really change your role and your own perspective too. So oftentimes we think that there's only 5 senses, right? That's pretty common. That's what I remember being taught that as a child. And I know in a lot of post-secondary courses, it's still taught like that and everything, but there are actually 8 senses that we need to be aware of. So we know the common 5. The other 3 these are big words, and it took me a few years to learn these words, how to say them. So it's okay if you can't say them right away. Proprioceptive, vestibular, and interoception are the 3 other senses that are actually really important. And I'm going to make connections with this back to play. Just give me a second here. Okay. It feels like we're probably going way out into left field, but I'm going to tie it all together. Okay, so proprioception is basically your body getting sensory information in through its muscles and joints. And it can really help children feel more, when I say calm, I mean calm and be able to handle emotions, calm to be able to develop their skills, calm, like their body is like regulated and good to go. They're good to keep going, right? So children, when they engage in heavy work, pushing, pulling, running, jumping, that is engaging the proprioceptive sense, getting that impact in their muscles and joints. And for most children, it's never all children, most children, that can be very calming for them. So how does that connect back to loose parts play? That dynamic piece, being able to push a box full of rocks, being able to carry big, heavy wood tree trunks, being, as the picture here, that's my little guy when he was younger, carrying a tree branch over top of his head, right? And walking around the backyard with that. So he's engaging in that heavy work. And for most children, that can be very calming for them. Children naturally like to do this, okay? The next sense that you might not have heard about is the vestibular sense. This is connected to your inner ear and balance. This is your body being able to know where your head is in space. So the term that's often used is called gravitational security. So it's just being able to like know where your head is in space and be able to get up and move about in your environment that you're in and have that confidence and like that ability. You know how you get like dizzy and you're like, whoa, I can't do this, right? And then once you're settled, you're like, okay, now I can move about, right? So children naturally to engage in this sense. We do this often with babies. What do we do with babies when they're upset? We naturally rock them back and forth, right? When we are rocking them back and forth in a linear direction, we are engaging that vestibular sense. It could be side to side or front to back. We are using a self-regulatory tool to help calm their nervous system, okay? Or maybe it's a quick bounce that might be engaging, that's engaging that vestibular sense as well. Another action that lots of children like to do is spinning. They love to spin. So we may think they're trying to cause more disruption or things like that, but they're not. They could be actually just trying to regulate themselves. Not all, and I'm going to use in air quotes, behaviors are always distressful. There's not always crying involved. Sometimes self-regulation comes through the spinning when overexcitement can also be dysregulation. Okay, so I'm going to tie this all back to loose parts play. So the other sense is interoception, and that is your body's ability to understand when it's hungry, thirsty, pain, whether or not to use the washroom, tiredness. You can feel your heartbeat and things like that. So all of these senses, all 8 of your senses have to develop. That you're not just born with your systems a certain way and they're ready to go. They all develop just like your language, social, cognitive, emotional, and physical skills, okay? And so how do we connect this back to loose parts play? Let's go to the theory. One of those slides said, when we have the right kind and number of variables in the environment, it can lead to more creativity and inventiveness, right? Those are higher level thinking skills. The only way to have higher level thinking skills is when a child is self-regulated. Let's look at all the different kinds of variables that we might bring in. Think about fabrics, plastic, light, natural items, wood. What do all of those do? They all provide a variety of sensory stimulation through tactile, visual, oral, olfactory, auditory, the proprioceptive, right? The heaviness. When we intentionally provide a variety of those different kinds of variables, we are naturally providing sensory stimulation for children that they can use every day in their play to help them develop their sensory systems and to help them self-regulate naturally during their play. When we say yes by giving them lots of different weighted items from the tree trunks, from the boxes, the transporting, the different fabrics, the tactile things, the different patterns, the different sensory bottles that we bring in that have different sounds. When we find materials that children can explore through their oral senses, we are naturally providing different sensory stimulation that helps them develop their sensory systems, and that they can also get into that, because when they're self-regulated, they can get into that higher level thinking. Okay, so this is some of the connections between loose parts play and sensory processing as well. Okay, but it's just about us going, what kinds of variables do I have? Not just looking at it through the different categories, but also looking at it through the different senses. How am I providing enough different sensory stimulation? And then also remembering that dynamic piece. That not only just helps with loose parts play, that creativity, but it also helps with self-regulation. And when we create environments and we have abilities for children to self-regulate to have through the different kinds of materials, and they're going to be more, that's going to lead to higher engagement in play, deeper level thinking, which benefits you, because that means that you get to spend more time observing, more time being an active play participant, more time documenting, getting into that educator is researcher mindset, instead of, we're never going to eliminate it, but hopefully we're going to reduce the amount or the intensity of behaviors as well. And that all depends on each child, and each child is so unique, but it can help, okay? So I always like to bring that perspective in there too. So I have a little case study here about connections between loose parts play and self-regulation. So I'm going to share this with you. I had this very first picture here is from my home, but my niece, we just moved into it, and my niece and nephew wanted to come over and they wanted to build forts. They said that they wanted to come over because we had all these empty boxes and they wanted to build forts. And they know when they come to Auntie's house, there's going to be lots of interesting things that they get to do. And so I said, sure, fine. I wasn't an official adult yet because I didn't have a formal dining room. I didn't feel like I became an official adult until I had a formal dining room space. And so this room was empty. And so I put all these boxes in here. I put some different fabrics. I put some mark making materials. I think I had string and tape and scissors as well, and paper. So a few different kinds of variables, right? It wasn't just boxes. Some were flat, some were, put into like the 3D structures as well. Okay. So I set it out for them. So what happened? Two of the children came in, and what did they first start doing? They started karate chopping the boxes. They started kicking them. They started punching them, right? And so sometimes our reactions might be to be like, whoa, stop. That's not what we intended to do here. You asked to make forts, so why are we kicking the boxes, right? That might be a reaction, and I totally understand that. I did not have that reaction because I have a different layers of knowledge now that can help inform my decisions. And I went, oh, okay, they're kicking and they're doing they weren't harming anybody. I didn't care if the boxes got damaged, and they were not hurting themselves, and they were not damaging property. So I was like, okay, they're having fun. They're playing. That's how they're choosing to play with it. So if I had said, no, don't do that, because that's not what our plan was, the children might not have done what they did next. So, because I knew what they were doing, I'm hoping you're seeing the connections here. When you're kicking and punching, what are you doing? You're getting impact in your muscles and joints, right? They were excited. They were doing karate chops. They're getting all that heavy work, proprioceptive input, and that is helping them self-regulate, okay? So if I had said no, they wouldn't have self-regulated, and they would have gone off, and it probably would have been a much more chaotic time. I didn't say anything, and not saying anything is by saying yes. And so they self-regulated. And then for the next hour, they created their forts. So 2 to 5 minutes of karate chopping and kicking the boxes led to 60 minutes of deep engaged play because they were regulated. And I didn't stop them before they could get into their own curiosities. Okay. So it's just a different way to look at it. And I see that play as purposeful because they're engaging in the play that they want to. Yes, they asked to make forts, but we all know that children change their ideas from moment to moment. So we have to be very flexible with that as well, right? And so when I say yes in ways that I can, and again, they weren't harming themselves, they weren't damaging property, okay? There's still boundaries with it. But that was that self-regulation. And as I talked about before, it can lead to deep engaged play. And that's exactly what happened, okay, in this particular sense, okay? So I just like to share this because it helps connect that theory to practice again too, okay? And so they all made their own little forts, and then they all lined them up. They moved the boxes, and they all like crawled into their little spots there, and there was light. They even grabbed other materials, like a little light orb that they had too. So again, it's the loose parts variables, right? You can see all the different sensory stimulation that they're getting as well, plus those different kinds of variables. And it leads to that creativity, the problem solving, the imagination, the independent work, the collaborative work, right? So it can lead to all of those when we use theory to inform our practice and put it into our practice. Okay, so now I want to move on to making connections with children's development. So we've learned about what loose parts play is. We talked about those misconceptions and fears, what it actually is. It's the movable dynamic pieces, how we use the variables intentionally, how we bring them into the environments through different kinds of them, how it can help with self-regulation. Now, oftentimes educators, and this is where it also helps with parents, sometimes they go, well, how is my child going to learn how to do these, like how to be school ready, what I'm going to do in quotation marks here, how to be ready, or how are they going to learn certain skills by playing with boxes and shells And tree stumps, like how is that going to get them ready, right? Because they may be going, well, we want to use worksheets, and I'm guessing if we're interested in this topic, we're a more play-based approach. So I'm going to help you make connections with loose parts play to children's development across some of the learning domains. So I'm just going to give you 3 different examples here to help get that going here. Okay, so here's an example of some loose parts variables that I brought out. I intentionally thought of like more under 3s when I put this setup together. This is my son here in the picture. So that's fine. So he loved black and white things. He's very visually orientated. He has his whole life has like, he always visually stims through that. And so I had different fabrics. Those pillows are like a weighted, like a bit of a heavier throw pillow. He likes that. Those are, there's also like cardboard tubes. I just used black paint and I painted it on the tube. And when you roll it, it creates like a visual thing, right? So I'm incorporating that visual thing. When he's rolling, he's also engaging in his physical domain too, hand-eye coordination, the crawling, things like that. There's crinkle paper in there. There's mirrors that are safe. They're acrylic mirrors. There was different tins. Those are metal those balls that are like mirror balls. They are metal, so like a light metal. They're safe for infants. 12 months plus is what it said on the box. And so I've taken them outside, I've put them in water. We've used paint with them. And so they're really cool. You can drop them on the floor. They don't break or anything like that. But they bring in that reflection piece, that light piece. There's also a coolness with the metal, right? I have a different picture where he's actually putting the metal ball on his face. But so he's feeling it, exploring with like the oral sense. He's also feeling the tactile of the coolness too, right? So all these different kinds of variables here. So this is one connection to learning that it could be. There is lots that is happening here. But I like to start off with simple sentences, especially when we might be having to showcase to families or to fellow educators to get them on board with loose parts play. I like to call these like sound bites. So I think about what I'm going to say. I even scripted in my head, because especially with families, we have like limited time at drop off and pickup to share with what's going on. And so this is one thing that you could consider with this is placing the mirror ball on my face helps me develop my tactile sense through exploring by touch and feeling the temperature of the metal. So we're connecting play to child development, right? I mean, you could write so much more about this, but that's also that self-regulation piece, right? We need to engage in the tactile sense, and tactile for texture and all that is not just with our hands, it's actually our entire bodies. The tactile sense is our biggest sense, right? So when we create opportunities with those different kinds of variables, we're creating many opportunities for children not to explore the different textures and temperatures of items, but also we're creating sensory stimulation opportunities to feel textures, temperatures, and things as well, okay? Okay, so that's just one example. Another one is, I'm going to have to just play this quick little video here. It's not long at all. It will load. I'm going to turn off my camera and see if that helps. There we go. Okay. Oh, I'm going to turn my camera back on. Okay, there we go. Okay, so you can see in that video that loose parts play that was happening with those children, it's very dynamic, right? It can seem a little chaotic, but it's really not. All of those children had their own ideas. There were some similarities in their ideas, but they were all deeply engaged in their play. There was some solitary parallel play going on, right? There was social aspects happening. The teacher was being an active participant, not leading the play, but helping facilitate it and being a play partner as well. And so that's a lot of what loose parts play is too, right? It's also very movable. It's that dynamic piece, right? So if I were to connect the learning with this and what toddlers don't like a ramp. Everybody likes a ramp, right? And so the teacher or the educator here is also having the ability to showcase speed and how height and levels can impact speed, right? If they wanted to raise that tube higher or put it lower, so what would happen? Like there's lots of opportunities for that too. So one of the examples that I have here is to connect the learning would be while playing with the balls and ramp, the children develop their social skills through playing follow the peer games and engaging in short group activities. So that's how I would showcase children developing in this particular situation to showcase how children are developing their social skills, right? As I said, you could use these kinds of prompts or ideas in your documentation or your conversations at the end of the day to help parents and other fellow educators understand why boxes, tires, balls, and ramps are actually helping them develop their skills, right? In those different learning domains. Okay.
Wonder if I put a little bit of this in green and then a little bit of this into the green too. Whoa.
Okay, let's start that over. Oops.
Wonder if I put a little bit of this in green and then a little bit of this into the green too. Whoa! Now keep. Whoa. What this is gonna? It's gonna wear off. Sometimes it wears off too quickly. If it's wearing off, if I wear off, what's wearing off?
Okay, so that was a video from my practice of the children exploring chemical interactions of colored vinegar and baking soda. There was also like ice and salt as well. Plus, we were using the natural elements of the sun because that was left out all day. So they got to see how the sun impacted the ice as well throughout the day because we left that out all day long. So they got to explore it all day while they played. But you can see here that that's also considered loose parts play because it's one of those different kinds of variables, right? The chemical interactions, right? That's part of it. It's a very dynamic aspect. I'm here observing. Obviously, I'm documenting through video, but I'm also observing and I'm listening. I'm hearing the different kind of language that they're trying to use to explain what's happening, right? The child used the phrase, it's wearing off. So they're trying to understand what this chemical interaction is and what's happening here. So if I were to explain that to an educator, a fellow educator, or to families, this is something I might say. So exploring chemical interactions like vinegar and baking soda helped me to develop math skills like measurement, problem-solving skills, and understanding the properties of materials as well. Okay, so again, this just helps families understand how vinegar and baking soda helps them build those skills. We're doing it in a playful, hands-on way that not only is connected to loose parts play, but also there's lots of sensory aspects happening too. And we're making those back that connection to cognitive skills or math skills. If that's, you could do cognitive skills too, if you didn't want to use math skills. But I know that sometimes there's concerns with families, right? So this is how we can advocate for play and connect that learning in a very meaningful way. When we use the photos or the videos that we take every day of children and then come up with these simple statements, it can really make it very impactful as well, because Parents have limited time. You all have limited time. So we need to use that very intentionally as well. Okay, so we're getting to the end here. So when you're first starting out, or you feel like you're getting stuck with embracing loose parts play, you have to remember where I was when I first started to where I am now. It has been years and years to get me there. I think when I first started embracing loose parts play, it was probably 2016, and we're now 2025. So almost 10 years of me learning and trying and learning about the theory and putting it into practice and seeing what's going to happen, and using reflective practice to help me grow and change as well. Okay. So again, at the beginning, I said this isn't about it being right or wrong, whether something is a loose part. It's more about that dynamic piece. Okay. And when you're first starting, just remember that you're going to make mistakes. That's going to happen, or you're going to be a little bit unsure if you're doing it right. When that feeling comes up, just ask yourself why. What is it about that I'm feeling like I'm getting stuck right now? And what can I learn from it? The other aspects to consider here are what I have on the slide. So consider using the children's current interest and adding some different variables into it. So if they're really into block plays and they're really into building different castles and homes, what about adding textures like fabrics or light? Different little push lights or different mirrors or different greenery. Those are all different kinds of variables that you could bring into the play and add. You can start small. You do not need to go and change everything at once. I didn't do that, okay? I would say start small, okay? You can also plan around a favorite story. You can use literacy. So if they have a certain book that they absolutely love all the time, think about what different kinds of variables might you bring in and talk about that. Be like, hey, you all love this book. I was wondering what we might be able to do with that. That's still a very open-ended question, and see what they do with it. And if they don't respond to it, that's okay. It's okay if children have changed their interest or they're not quite sure yet. We need to give it time. Okay. So if they don't run to it initially, that's okay. Leave it out for a little while and see what happens. Or you play with it and model that and see if that engages their curiosity. And if they still don't get into it, that's okay. Go, maybe I'll try it somewhere else. Or what else do I know about the children? What other kind of variable might I bring in? And sometimes it just takes time. Sometimes educators think that it has to happen as soon as they bring in these new variables. And that's not always the case. It might take a little bit of time. Some children have not been used to environments where they are allowed to be freely creative because of different rules or things like that. So it might take a little time for them to feel safe and know that their ideas are valued as well. Okay. Combine their traditional toys. Do not go and get rid of the dolls and the cars and the dinosaurs. Don't go and get rid of any of that stuff. Keep it. Those are still very valuable toys, but see how you can bring in different variables to enhance that play and see how that could open up different perspectives. Okay. You can start off with little tinker trays. So you could collect a few different items that you might like and see what that do. Put that out, okay? But always remember, consider those sensory elements. So think about collecting a variety of different items across those different types of categories and variables, and think about those different sensory systems that we talked about too, because that can be really helpful, can be really engaging. Like light and mirrors, children love to explore light and mirrors, okay? Okay, so a quick framework that can help in the moment, especially when you're observing or you're not too sure what to do and you're first starting out with this parts play. This comes from John Muir Laws. He's a nature journal educator, but he uses this framework of I notice, I wonder, and it reminds me. So I suggest to use this when you are observing children playing and just start writing down. There's no right or wrong answer to this. You can write down, I notice that they are playing with this type of variable. I notice that they move these items from here to there. I notice that these children play together. Whatever it is, whatever you notice, just write it down. And then I wonder why they like to do this, or I wonder what type of play they're engaging in, or I wonder what they're thinking, or whatever it is, right? There's no right or wrong answer. And then it can start to go into, it reminds me. This is where you can start making connections. It reminds me of the time that I saw them do this outside as well, not just inside. It reminds me of, I don't know, I would need a certain context to have more ideas, but that's where you can start to have more connections with it. So it's a little bit of a guided thinking framework so you don't get stuck. Okay, so you can go back and look at how are the different kinds of variables that they're using and how much you respond. It's a suggestion. If you don't want to use it, that's fine. It's just a suggestion, because I know sometimes educators can get a little stuck of how to start. And I want to give you a practical framework to help with that in the moment, because it's not just about the physical, tangible items, right? It's more about the dynamic piece. And our mindset can really help open those opportunities. I have a little saying here, is that I plan for the wonder and curiosity. I trust that the learning will happen. My role is to observe the children, see what do I believe that they're interested in, how do they learn, how am I going to respond to that? And I trust that they are going to learn what they need to learn. Whether or not I can see it yet in the observation, that is on me, but I'm going to trust that they are going to learn what they need to learn from this experience. And I'm going to observe and see what I can learn from it. And that keeps me in that educator as researcher mindset too. So quick here, storage ideas. I have a whole blog post on storage as well. And so it's also linked in the guide that you're going to be able to get in the next slide. I have one more slide, that's it, okay? So clear containers I find to be the best aspects, because you can easily see. Ziploc bags are wonderful, large clear totes, and I try to organize by category, so like those like plastic, metal, fabrics, because then it keeps it very open-ended. I don't organize like cars, or I don't organize through transportation or animals or anything like that. I do it based on like the different categories: metal, fabrics, natural items, and then I categorize by size as well. And I use a lot of clear containers so I can easily see what I have. Okay. Oh yes. The best way to engage with loose parts play is play, play, play. So after this session, I know you guys are a community of educators. I would encourage you at some point to use, when I get the next slide is the guide. When you get that guide, you're going to get all these inventory lists of items that you might want to collect. Gather some items and just start playing as a community with these different variables and seeing what happens. These are some pictures of workshops that I've done where I've brought in a variety of different variables, and the educators got to play, and we made all those connections through hands-on play too. Okay. So here is that free guide if you'd like to get it. There are like 8 or 9 pages of inventory lists. There's resources that you can use and share with families to help them understand what loose parts play is and to make the connections across the different learning domains. There are links to different resources on my blog about storage and everything else in there too. There's lots of resources in this freebie as well. And then in a second, I'll just put the last slide there where it's like, you can find me on Instagram, and I have a blog on my website and all that kind of stuff. I have quite an extensive blog as well. I can make sure I send the link for this loose parts play guide too, so that people can get it after their presentation as well. Okay. So like I said, I have a full blog. You can find my website at cultivatingconfidence.ca, and you can please stay connected. I love getting emails from my fellow educators, and I will respond. And I would love to hear how you're doing with your loose parts play journey as you start to embrace it. And thank you so much for having me tonight.
Veronica, I was so excited about this presentation because I know you're stellar. This loose parts play is something that's really starting to come about. And so I hope that everyone here can take away at least 1 or 2 ideas that you can start in your classroom. I've been doing some research on some of her other presentations. She's also presented for us before and been on our podcast, so you can look for her there also. Veronica, thank you so much for being here. And thank you to our attendees. If you have any questions, you're welcome to come off mute really quick. I will stop the recording.